This is the Real Coaching Podcast. I'm Joel Filiol, coach of JFTcrew, the multinational triathlon squad, and the Olympic Performance Director of the Italian Triathlon Federation. Last week we started the long-awaited Season 3 of the podcast with Anti-Process 2020 was the show title. And thanks for the nice reception of bringing the podcast back. And you can now find the ebook of this podcast, which I edited out to have a clean, clear read of all the topics. So if you prefer to read rather than just listen, you can find that on my website on joelfiliol.com/shop. Also there was a nice reception to the ebooks that I've posted there. A number of small projects that might eventually be put together into a comprehensive manual, but it's a start, and your feedback helps with that process. The Building the Elite Triathlete includes a number of our schedules that we use, progressions, season planning for development, and following that, there's the characteristics of the high-level triathlete and also how champions train. And these three mini books, or you could say chapters, they're a lot about attitude, commitment, behaviors in addition to specific training points. And like we talked last week with the difference between successful athletes, why are some athletes successful, why do some athletes achieve more, it's a lot to do with these points, primarily commitment, behaviors, habits, the attitude that athletes bring to their career. So that's why I spend a lot of time talking about these points as key difference makers, but there is some specifics in training there as well. And there's also characteristics of effective coaching, which has got a video webinar, audio, and ebook, and that's along the same lines. What are the difference makers in coaching? What are the characteristics of effective coaching, in the sense that technical knowledge, knowing about physiology, knowing about sports science, knowing about endurance sport is not enough in terms of how can you effectively apply that knowledge. And so this presentation, this topic goes through a number of characteristics, I think, that can be developed to be more effective. So there's more recordings of webinars in the pipeline, of presentations I've done in the past, topics I've done in the past that I find very useful to revisit and update. So those are coming on my website. Before we go into the main topic today, I've got a couple of questions from the queue that we didn't get to last week, and I've got a number of these that I've built up over the last couple of years while we've been waiting for Season 3. And the first one of these is when planning for the athletes, for the squad, how far ahead do you plan, and what cycles do you work in? I've talked about this over various times, and indeed in the ebooks that I've just mentioned. But my coaching process in general, like a lot of coaches, goes week by week. So I plan when I'm actually talking about implementing the plan, writing the program, updating based on the feedback that we've seen, checking the data from the week before, and feedback from the athlete. That goes week by week. But really that's connecting to the bigger picture, and it's probably beyond the scope of just this question, but planning for the whole season, working back from the primary objectives. What things do we need to develop? What do we need to work on? And building back step by step to the present. And when I'm thinking about these planning blocks, I'm also thinking, how long do we need to work on a particular area before, in order to see improvement? What's the right stimulus to get the response, to get the adaptation that we're after? And so in terms of planning these types of cycles, say that minimum would be 3 to 4 weeks of a particular focus. Maximum 6 to 7 weeks, probably more typical 5 to 6 weeks, depending on the time of year and whether we're talking about off-season progressions or preparing for races. So we could generalize between 3 and 7, 8 weeks, where we're working on a particular type of training, on a particular adaptation that we're looking for, a particular focus. And within that, we try to, of course, have progressions and variation in the type of stimulus, the type of work that we're doing. So if it was, a strength or a technical drag-based focused in swimming, that might be as short as 3 or 4 weeks or slightly longer, in order that we see an adaptation. And I think a lot of athletes sort of confuse what qualities they express in a particular session versus actually improving those qualities, improving those characteristics. Takes much longer, many more repetitions of a particular stress in order to get that response. So if we were talking about the swim drag block, minimum of 2 sessions per week like that, spread over 5 to 7 weeks might be a typical approach. So that's many repetitions of that kind of stress in order to expect response. And that can progress over time, but I think we need to have that kind of approach in order to see improvement, rather than just demonstrating whatever qualities or condition the athlete currently has. So differentiating between current situation and where we want to go, and how much repetition do you need to do in order to see adaptation, and again, a progression within that. So planning week by week based on what we're seeing. I think that's important as well, that we build in the process to observe what the adaptation is, what the stress is. Do you need to make changes? And my workflow is week by week with this, with of course an idea and a progression of what the next step are within these longer blocks of work, which connect again to where the athlete needs to improve, where we want to improve our process towards the season structure and the main events. Again, go into that with this, the ebook, Building the Elite Triathlete. I'll go into that in slightly more detail. Next question is, what are the usual mistakes that I see in training programs and from my experiences? And what are others missing or not doing enough of? And the typical mistake that I see in my travels and my work is that the intensity, the quality of the high intensity training is too high relative to the reality of the athlete, of the real condition of the athlete. Again, I often see athletes working in dream paces, goal paces that are many steps down the line than the reality. And I think certainly some athletes and coaches think, if we want to run a 30-minute 10K, then we need to do a whole bunch of training at 3 minutes per K, for example. But if their current condition is, say, 32 minutes for 10K, then they're going to end up accumulating too much volume of intensity at beyond the current condition. We have to work from where we're at now, because it's about the concept of stress and response and getting the stress right in order to improve. You have to work from where you're currently at. And so I see this all the time. Often it takes the form of young athletes doing run sessions faster than some of the champions that I work with. And again, I come across this quite frequently. And that's often in the context as well, as if you're focused on the high intensity work that you're doing, and your focus is on these key workouts. It can be easy to lose track of the overall workload of swim, bike, run week by week. That's the difference maker. That's how you improve that global volume accumulated over time. But I often see young athletes competing, training in very high intensity, but with low volume. So their high quality sessions look impressive, but it's in the context of low overall volume and frequency. And that's a very short-term approach. And I think it's why a lot of athletes don't improve over time. Can make juniors or young athletes look very impressive in their training, but then when it comes to racing, they've not done the work that they need to do to progress, as seen eventually U23 and then senior athletes. And so it's that like short-term approach. You get a lot of positive feedback when you see fast sessions, but that's short-term in the sense of we see the output of that, but we don't see the amount of time it takes, and we don't see that we're compromising future development by not accumulating that aerobic volume. And even as the triathlon has a variety of different distances, and we see a number of short distances, Super League, mixed relay, super sprint in the future. It's still going to be important to build that aerobic profile, to build that chronic load over time in order to compete effectively in all those range of distances. And it's keeping the long term in mind, keeping the long progression in mind, and keeping patience and self-discipline in order to do the right intensity at the right time. What are others missing, doing not enough of? I think overall it's about this intensity piece, and it's about keeping the long term in mind, keeping long development. There are no shortcuts. There's no magic training that you can do that's going to make a quick difference. And I mean, that's the challenge in sport, is how do we keep the big picture in mind? How do we keep focused on the right things, which don't give an immediate payoff? And of course, the short term also has the side effect of potentially creating high stresses that can impact health and injury, and those are going to be again the things that will come up and slow progression or stop progression for athletes in the long term. So the main topic this week is a chat I did a few weeks ago with Barrie Shepley. Barrie and his company and club, the C3 Triathlon Club in Ontario in Canada, had an online clinic lasting a whole day with chats with a number of different coaches and athletes, and I was very happy to chat with Barrie. It's really Barrie interviewing me, and it gives a bit of going into my history and my progression. I think Barrie deserves a longer chat talking about his history and his contribution to Canadian triathlon, which is just massive. Barrie is one of the originators, the innovators of triathlon in Canada, in Ontario. He's been there since the beginning. he was involved in integral in Simon Whitfield's gold medal in Sydney, and just really building through his club, through events. I don't know if there's a bigger builder of triathlon in Canada from from the beginning to today. And Barrie, when I was a teenager, was my coach before I competed as a junior. I used to get fax training programs from Barrie that I would follow, and then go to club sessions outside of Toronto. And as we get into participated in all sorts of training camps that he did, and was part of this Vision team, which was a junior high performance club in the mid 90s. And so Barrie's had a big influence on me, and we also know him as the voice of triathlon, of World Triathlon, commentating for many years, and producer of all kinds of events. So really enjoyed catching up with Barrie, and we'll have to do a future chat more into his history and his impact on triathlon in Canada.
Now, if you truly are in the know, you know who Joel Filio is. But if you're kind of new to the sport, maybe just getting started the last year or two, you might have heard the name, but you don't realize that one of triathlon's legends is an actual Canadian who has parents still living in, I think, Brantford. So, Joel Filio, thank you for taking time. I know it's late over in Scotland where you are, so hopefully we're not keeping your kids up. But just give us a quick sense of how are things in COVID and everything over in your part of the world right now.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Barrie. It's great to chat with you. Things here, whether they're good or bad is hard to say. Depends on your perspective. But we're thankful at the moment that schools are going and everyone is healthy in our circle, and that we're able to have some activities for the kids to do. And I think that's been really nice to see after being at home for a long time and seeing the impact on the kids. So from that point, happy and all good for us.
I'm not sure if it was 12. It was definitely in that 12, 13 kind of window that I recall you. Take us back to a Joel Filio from Brantford, starting in Kids of Steel. I mean, it's something that I take great pride in, that program.
Yeah, I was trying to find some photos. Of course, you didn't take as many photos in those days, but I saw a newspaper article of my first triathlon in 1990. It was organized by the Cornwall Cycle Club, where I was born in Cornwall, Ontario. And so I was 12 and they made a note in the results, Joel Filio 12 years old, because I was the only young person. But then I went on to the Kids of Steel races, and that was a great opportunity in Ontario. Raced all over Ontario, traveling around, and was really thankful for that opportunity to have fun and to enjoy triathlon, and that I wouldn't be here now if there wasn't Kids of Steel in Ontario, I think.
Collingwood, I have this recollection of you at the National Ski Academy. Is my brain getting foggy as I get older? Were you up at one of our camps that we had in Collingwood?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I remember doing our training camps there, and that was probably the first time I crossed paths with Simon Whitfield, of course, when he was still racing a junior, a couple of years older than I was, Jasper Blake and others, and we had a great time up there. And it was, again, those kind of experiences, thinking back how formative they were, and the opportunity to join those guys who are at a much higher level than I was.
Now, you obviously had a very solid young career, world championships. What decided the coaching pathway at such a young age versus taking your talents? Did you have an assessment that you were just going to be a much better coach down the road than you're going to be an athlete? How did that decision work out?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly from the point of view of my performances and I suppose my raw talent anyway, I could see that I wasn't going to be as good as some of the other contemporaries. I did race the Junior Worlds in Cleveland in '96, and I did some duathlon. I did the Cancun the year before, but my performances weren't as good, and I could see with those who I was associated with, had an opportunity to guide them a little bit, my partner at the time, and we kind of grew together. But really that sliding doors moment, if you like, was having enough results to get invited out as an apprentice coach to Victoria, British Columbia, and that was in 2001. So we were in the the post Simon gold in Sydney experience, as you were such a key part of, and being part of that as an apprentice coach. So I decided to stop my university studies at the University of Waterloo and pack up a U-Haul and drive across Canada and really without really knowing what that would entail, but take the chance. And so it was a long journey, about 4.5 days across Canada, as anyone that's done that knows, and set up in Victoria and really learn how to coach properly.
Now, I see over your shoulder a picture of Simon Whitfield. So clearly, he's a guy that has impacted both your life, my life, and virtually any triathlete in Canada who's under the age of 80. Talk about that era. It's now 2004 or 5, up to the Beijing Olympic Games. Just having that kind of I mean, you knew what he was about, his talent, his unique personality, his bigger than life, just kind of a shadow he puts on the whole sport. Just talk about that era and your unique opportunity as a young coach to have such a phenomenal athlete.
Absolutely. I mean, you had Greg Bennett on earlier, and Greg and Simon and Laura and Victoria. What a great opportunity to learn and to watch these guys, and then to have that opportunity after the Athens Olympics when Simon had a good performance, but I think it was 11th place, so it's not quite what he was interested in and about, and he wanted to reinvent himself. And I think it was one of those moments of being in the right place at the right time and having had a relationship already, and really Simon taking a chance on me, and growing together. And certainly when I reflect on the biggest influences in my coaching and my process and into relationships right up to today, having the opportunity to work with someone like Simon, who was such a clever athlete in terms of his overall athletic knowledge, his decision making, his courage to go all in, and also to need to meet him in the middle a bit, like to be a performance partner, not, as a formative coach, as a young coach, I couldn't be the way with him like I would be with a junior or another young athlete. I had to really learn how do you coach somebody who's way more experienced than you are, has achieved way more. I could never catch up in experience, but I could help put the pieces around him that would allow him to express what he could do. And so we had a fantastic group in those years with Colin Jenkins, Kyle Jones. We had great athletes around, and I really reflect on that time as some of the best moments in coaching to grow, and a great energy. And we saw that in Beijing with Colin supporting Simon to a fantastic performance where he won the silver medal. But you watch those last 2 minutes of that race and you see somebody really go all in and take the risk to win and come up short, but so much courage to fight for that gold medal again. And I think a silver is a huge victory in that sense of what it took to get there.
It was impressive when you think about that squad you had. I mean, one of my all-time favorite guys, Daniel Wells,
Yes.
Contributed to that group, both as an athlete, driving the van to get to, Arizona, Flagstaff, racing himself and bringing his spectacular, swimming abilities. And my mind goes blank here. Remind me of the great cyclist you had from the U.S. that was in your squad.
Well, we had Jordan Rapp,
That's it, Jordan.
Of course, a long distance legend in his own way, and certainly a huge influence on us in his approach that he brought as an engineer, and he's still doing that today with Zwift and with other projects. And absolutely, Dano. I mean, these guys who, while they weren't top world triathlon athletes in themselves, but they brought so much to that group, and it was a great model still that I think about today in the sense of how different people can bring different things and contribute to success. And you don't necessarily need everybody on the same level, even though it's a bit different now, but people really want to contribute to a project that they believe in. And we had a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, kudos. I mean, I was so proud as a Canadian to watch. I remember the decision-making process when Colin got selected and people criticizing whether that was good or bad. It was good if a medal happened. It was bad if a medal didn't happen. So you and I were, sweating a little less after the games were over. But to watch that. So here you go, young coach in Canada. You're at the pinnacle. I mean, you have just won a silver medal You're a young guy. You've proven that you can make magic out of a little bit of resources. And then you head over to the UK as the high performance director, and you've got the chance to be overseeing the two next legends, Alistair and Johnny Brownlee, and they are going to be racing at home, at the London Olympics. I mean, you step from amazing to amazing. Talk about that transition and, being over, you've left home, you've gone across the pond, you're not where your comfort zone is, and now you got to see if you can make that magic happen someplace else.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It was a big decision. As you said, it was another one of these moments where things can go in different directions. What are we going to do? We've had this big success, but that also has a cost, and one of the costs, I think, is needing to change after. And certainly that was it for me. And like a lot of coaches, it on my personal life, it took a big toll, all that process. Which I don't regret at all, but it was the reality. It was time to make a change, and so I had this opportunity. Um, a number of things aligned. I wasn't actually offered a contract until a bit later on, and then this new opportunity came up, and I thought, what better to take the opportunity to lead a country as head coach into a home games. And I knew in advance what it was and what it wasn't, but I definitely learned myself, okay, where is my real value here? But taking a head coach, different role in that it wasn't meant to be a coaching role. So I wasn't the coach of any of those great British athletes. A great learning opportunity from them. I mean, at the time, I didn't even really notice Alistair in the Beijing Olympics, to be honest. But then now you go and look back and you see this incredible mentality. And at the time, he was probably a bit more confident than his condition allowed. But go back and then look and see now what he's done from that moment.
I remember my call. If you look back, I can still remember making the statement. He's got young boy legs right now, but give him another year, and basically for the next decade after that Beijing Olympics, he was the dominant man and maybe the greatest ever to race at Olympic distance. So you made a change in terms of once you went there and had that role. And just to kind of clarify for the viewers, you went away from you wanted to get back to coaching in essence. You didn't want to coach coaches, you didn't want to coach paper, you wanted to coach bodies. And so Joel Filio leaves the Brownlees, pretty much guaranteed that you're going to be able to put your name on 2 more medals at the Olympic Games. You step out of that, and I'm not quite clear at that point, like you're stepping out to like Joel Filio Incorporated, no funding. I am crazy man out here, putting my little shingle out and seeing if any athlete wants to come and pay me. I'm not under any federation. I'm not getting any funding.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, that was 2011. I was staring down the barrel of 2 more years of, as you say, almost guaranteed success. With Alistair was world champion at that point, but it wasn't where I could add the most value. And I think that's where I was learning about myself is what do I enjoy doing? And I really get a lot from the relationships with these athletes, being part of their process. And being a kind of manager of that is really a different thing altogether. And at that moment, I didn't get much back from that. And so I was thinking, I'm not going to be very happy here doing this. I'm going to take a risk. And I did jump into the void because I didn't have something else lined up. And it did give me some time to reflect, though. And it wasn't until after the London Olympics that things really started to take shape. And although I was fortunate enough to rekindle relationships with Kyle Jones and Lauren Groves at the time, we started the project, but it really took off after the London Olympics. And in these cycles, a lot of athletes look to make changes around those times. And that was when I made contact with Mario Mola and Richard Murray and others, and really our first camps at the end of 2012 and the beginning of 2013. And that's continued on to today with our sort of JFTcrew format.
Now, for the viewer who's new to this, we are talking about, in that 4-year window and now this last 4 years, some of the greatest athletes to ever do the sport, are now kind of coming to the Joel Gypsy School of Travel. I mean, you and I have traveled a lot of hours and sat in lots of coffee shops and airports around the world. How does this kind of thing, congeal? Do you say, I'm only going to take X athletes and I got to see if those personalities will fit to the ones who are already in the system? Like, how do you make those kinds of tough decisions? Because we're talking about a Spaniard with a South African, with an American, with a Canuck, with an Italian. You know, you've got the UN. You might have another job, UN leader, you know, when this triathlon career ends. But how do you make those decisions?
Yeah, I think partly you learn as you go. You learn by making some mistakes, some bad decisions. But we were really fortunate that some of the early members of the group, including Tommy Zaferes, who's still present, ever present in World Triathlon, that we really had some great personalities from the beginning. And so there was a bit of luck because I didn't know everyone, but I guess it's also how we work together and we found our way. So we did kind of learn as we go, and certainly I've refined that process through to now. But absolutely balancing these different personalities, what do they need, what kind of environment is going to make them thrive, has evolved. So I don't think we got it right at the beginning, but we started to form and find a way to support individuals within the group environment. And it's something that, okay, everyone does a similar program, but what are those differences? What are the differences that people need? And Rich Murray was one of those athletes that needed something a little different than Mario. And so we needed to identify what those were so that we could continue to be successful. It wasn't a matter of just these guys pushing each other to go faster. In fact, that's almost the opposite of our ethos. Our ethos is all about control, self-discipline, self-management, decision-making. And despite what we may look at from the outside, these great athletes are not being successful, in my view, by pushing each other harder, but just supporting each other through the day-to-day process. And that the power of that environment where maybe you're a bit tired in the morning, but you've got to meet the others, and so you get a bit more motivation every day to go through that process, and supporting each other in that way, I think gets us more likely to get it right for race day. And so that's what we see. So it's different than what some people think from the outside.
I mean, there must be some really unique challenges. You've got athlete X who's got well funded by a federation and or well sponsored, and you've got other guy who I've got to go in the back of the bus here because I can't afford a better seat as we fly over to XYZ. I mean, at this point, most of those guys are self-funded, maybe a little bit of federation money coming in, but there's got to have been some unique situations you've had to deal with, as somebody's walking to the back of the plane past somebody who's sitting up in first class.
Absolutely, and even as our project as a squad, we also didn't receive really funding. I get little bits here and there, but it forced us to focus on what's important and what makes the difference, and so of course I'm not the first one and I won't be the last to go along this road. I always think, who are the coaches that came before that developed this model? It could be back from Cole Stewart many years ago. Darren Smith was a big influence before, and so I look what does these guys do? What can I learn from them, and how can I apply my own learnings to this? And absolutely, they all have to contribute, and I think a big part of this is the decision for the athletes to invest in themselves. So they decided, look, I'm going to invest in this, and I'm going to have to reach into my pocket, whether I've got the funding or not, and figure out a way to make this work. And I think that's been hugely powerful. So whether you've got nil funding or whether you're backed by one of the richest federations, often when you decide to go on your own, if as it were, into a project like this, you don't get the same anyway as if you stay inside the system. So you've got to decide, well, I want to invest in myself. I want to, what really makes a difference to me as an athlete. Put your money on the line, and that commitment is so powerful. And I think that's the difference maker, is the athlete deciding, look, it's my career. I want to do the best for myself, and taking control of that, and that's the autonomy, the leadership that we saw from Simon back in the day, and from many others that came through Victoria, like Greg, like Laura, like many others. And what the athletes are currently doing, what they have to decide, look, I want to invest in this, I want to invest in the relationship, and also work with others with the same goals. And so we've been really lucky that we've had so many that have bought into that kind of project.
When you look at the current crop of athletes you have, I'm not sure there's ever in the history of the sport been more just pure swim, bike, run talent that's out there. Greg talked about, that Simon was not a particularly great swimmer back in, 98, 99. And I was in Kitzbühel when he came out of the water ahead of Andy Potts. And, that was one of his all-time great athletic accomplishments. I mean, run, I know how to run, but to come out of the water ahead of Andy Potts in a World Cup. Can you just kind of comment? You've seen them from both being an athlete yourself and then through just how the quality of the athletes are just, rising with every quadrennial.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's a process of the athletes that have come before that have raised the standard, and you have to react. So I always think it's hard to compare the stars of the previous generation. They raced who they could race, and we've seen various game changers come along. You could say Javi Gomez, huge game changer in terms of the standard of the racing, the complete athlete. Of course, Al and Johnny coming through after. And Mario and Vince, they've raised the game in their own way, and certainly it's gotten more and more compact. The gaps that can be out of the swim smaller and smaller in order to be successful. The level of the riding has increased tremendously. The technical nature of the courses, the modern course, has made the bike so much harder, and we've had to adapt to that. We've had to increase our technical training on the bike. The amount of time we spend on skills, on sprints and recoveries is quite different than many years ago. And the run is ever increasing, where we see you really need to be the complete athlete now. And of course, the new evolution is the impact of the mixed relay and perhaps eventually super sprint, where we'll see what happens in the Paris cycle, whether we have a new event. I think the I2 would like to have another event. And what is the impact on that? And I think that's still somewhat forming. We've seen probably that move along a little faster with the Super League. Okay, let's see what these guys can do over very short races and mixed format. And often at the moment, it's the same athletes, which is incredible versatility of these guys to compete and prepare for and execute over different distances. And it's more or less the same ones. And I guess we'll see over the next years if there's more specialization or not, or how the athletes have to adapt and evolve in order to continue to be successful.
Sheldon, we've got a couple of questions for Joel. Part of our problem is that we could keep him here till midnight his time, but we've got about 8 or 9 minutes. Can you kind of pop off a question or two for him?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Joel. Very informative. And throughout the day, we've had some amazing questions for our awesome guests. And we do have some for you. First one, while we know that you need to respect the skill and competency of each athlete, do you have a broad strategy or philosophy that you focus on with each discipline?
I think actually the interesting part about triathlon is, okay, we can break it down into disciplines, but I think the interesting part is really how they merge together and how we build training programs where we recognize the interactions between the three sports together in terms of energy. So that's been my focus, and that has evolved in my thinking over the last 5 or 6 years, where I think we want to improve the run. How do we have to manage the swim and bike training? Because that it's not just about running faster or more training load. It's what are the impacts of the three sports together? And that's really interesting, and every athlete's a little different with that. I mean, the super high efficiency swimmers, then when they get tired, it doesn't impact their swimming so much. But others, you increase the run load and their swimming goes down. And so how are we going to manage that so they arrive race day with all three firing? Because as we just were talking, you need to have all three ready to go to have that complete performance. So I've really been thinking about those interactions, the energy, the recovery, in order that we can move all three together at the same time.
Excellent. Thanks, Joel. Next question for you. Where do you see the sport going? What do you see the next evolutions in the next 7 to 10 years in the sport?
Well, I think as the relay has become into a bigger prominence, and I'm speaking primarily first on the Olympic side. That's where my focus is typically day to day, although I follow every part of triathlon. What is going to be the impact of that? It changes the dynamic for the individual athlete in the sense that their pathway through the the Olympic system, if you like, the funding, the support they get, training camps, coaches, etc., it started to move a little more towards the relay for some countries. It's something perhaps a little bit more thought of as controllable as opposed to the individual, and we're seeing a little bit of focus. Some countries think perhaps, well, we've got a better chance in the relay than how are we going to manage the individual. We don't think we have quite as much chance, and I think the challenge for someone like myself, but also the athletes, is how do we continue to focus on the individual progression, the individual athlete within that context. My belief is that the best team is basically the best four individuals, but how do they continue to develop and get the right experience, the right opportunities? I'm sure every country would like to have four Vincent Louis or four Mario Molas, but and also of course the female equivalents, Katie Zaferes, Flora Duffy, etc. They want to have that great team of four medal potential athletes. But I think the risk of the individual getting lost in this process is there, and we have to pay attention that we're taking care of them as individual athletes and they continue to grow. And because the great thing about triathlon is all the opportunities that we have had available that the athletes can choose. They can choose to do 70.3, they can choose to do Super League, they can go long and do Ironman, as we've seen Alistair, Jan Frodeno and others make that transition. And that's been one of the fantastic things about our sport, is it's not just one dimensional. We've got so many different dimensions to it, and I'd like to see that our athletes continue to have those opportunities as we evolve with the different disciplines.
Last question for you, Joel, and I know we could spend hours with you chatting. What do you consider the 2 to 3 most important ingredients in a successful coach-athlete relationship?
I think, of course, the communication and the basis of being able to trust each other is a big part of that. And it's something I look at the beginning, of our relationship is are we going to be able to meet in the middle here? Is the athlete open to being coached and guided and led? And equally, for myself as a coach, I see that I can add value to this athlete, and that my experience and theirs will lead in the right direction. But certainly it's commitment that underpins that part of the relationship. I mean, being committed to the project, and it's something by having a relatively high bar of entry in terms of that investment that I talked about with Barrie, that filters out the uncommitted in a way for me. But that commitment in any case, that you're going to embark on this project together and you're going to see it through the inevitable ups and downs, because there's never a perfect process without setbacks, and when you're committed to each other, then you work through those kind of setbacks that you have together. So I mean, certainly that comes up all the time. We need rock solid commitment to each other and to find a way forward to reach the best potential that we've got.
Joel, last kind of just, no one's paying attention to what we're saying here, so it's just you and I. Your thoughts of your athlete heading down to Daytona. You've got a couple racing down in Daytona. Where does that fit into the preparation for 2020 with the Olympics? Obviously next year. Is it a fun end of the season thing? Is it, holy crap, there's a lot of dough down there, I'm going to go down there and blow everybody's drawers off?
I see really 2020 as one where if you're ready to take opportunities, then we look at what's available, what's interesting, what's motivating. Because it's been such a challenging year in terms of getting up to do the important work to prepare big on a big stage. And everyone's handled it differently. And the ones that really felt ready to seize those opportunities, those are the ones that are looking at races like Daytona, where, okay, it's late in the year, there's a lot of challenges around that. What is going to be the impact? Well, everything is different this year. Everything about how we prepared, what is the impact on next year. I think we're getting used to operating with a bit of uncertainty and taking the opportunities when we can have them. And if you're motivated, driven, well, let's have a go.
I can't thank you enough. I'm going to make one of my projects over the next 5 years that you are properly recognized in Canada, because you are a treasure. I know that you still have great pride in being from Canada, parents there. You've left your mark with the Kyles and the Laurens and the Simons and so forth. And I continue to take great pride knowing where you got your start, that you are working with the very greatest athletes in the world, humbly just doing your thing. Like, you go to races, you wouldn't even know that Joel is there. You're just doing your thing, and your athletes are the rock stars as they should be. But I admire how you've handled it. I would put you in the top 5 coaches ever in the history of triathlon, and continuing to move up. So we wish you best of luck as you get into 2021, and good luck to your lovely daughters. And Carrie, your wife, I know that they are your rock that kind of keep you grounded when you get back to Scotland after so many months living in hotels around the world.
Well, thanks so much, Barrie. I mean, of course, I have to take the opportunity to thank you for everything you do. The original builder of Canadian triathlon. I don't know if there's anybody that could have contributed more over the years, from, probably the oat in your basement, Triathlon Canada in your basement kind of thing. And certainly I wouldn't be here without the Canadian Cross Training Club, without the Vision team, without all the projects that you've contributed. So I don't know if you hear it enough, but I absolutely appreciate all of your contributions, and everything that I've achieved is off of the back of yourself and everything that you've built. So I really appreciate the opportunity.
Very, very kind. It wasn't that recognition to you wasn't to get it back, but it's nice that when legends out there do recognize that you had some small little part of their career. So Joel, we will follow you, and I'll be down in Daytona, so I have no doubt that I'm going to see some of the Joel Filio squad athletes on the podium in Daytona in a few weeks. So we thank you very much, and hope you have a safe holiday, and when you get back to Canada, let us know. We'd love to catch up.
Likewise. Thanks so much, Barrie. So that was the chat with Barrie Shepley. Thanks again to Barrie for the interview / going through the history. And we'll look forward to a more in-depth chat in the future. Thanks again for the feedback on this season 3 of the Real Coaching Podcast. Feedback, questions, comments, direct is best. Send them to podcast@joelfiliol.com. Posting these on all of the socials, but not active on the social these days. So if you post a comment there, I won't see it right away. So check out the ebooks, the webinars that I've posted. Please give me comments on those, and any comments, questions for the podcast. It's going to be part of how I push this forward, is thinking about the questions you send in, topics that I want to think about as well. So please send those in, and thanks for listening.